Following breaking news on Capitol Hill, lawmakers are set to vote today on whether or not to help fund TSA workers who have been working without pay and alleviate the long hours travelers have been facing, those lines at airports due to this DHS shutdown. Joining me now is California Congressman Jimmy Gomez. He's a member of the House Intelligence and Ways and Means Committees. Congressman, thanks for being with us on a weekend. We're in day 36. We're in day 36 now of this partial government shutdown. Republicans have objected to Democrats' attempts to pass a standalone funding situation for TSA, for FEMA, and other agencies through unanimous consent. They're also rejecting most of the demands to reform ICE. In your view, what's realistic as far as a path to a deal here?
Well, we can go for a few paths. One, we have a discharge petition to fund TSA, FEMA, counterintelligence, a bunch of departments that don't include ICE in order to make sure that the country is still protected. So we have about 184 members, Democrats, that have signed up. We're going to get to the full slate of members by Tuesday, and then we're going to put pressure on Republicans to join us because ICE and CBP has become so unpopular. Even the president and the White House have told his administration not to talk about mass deportation, not to saying that they've gone too far. Even Bovino, who was basically running the raids across the country, is retiring because of the backlash. So we say join the Democrats, help pass these funding bills for these other departments, and negotiate some changes when it comes to ICE and CBP. The changes are not mind-boggling. Don't deport U.S. citizens. You know, that should be pretty obvious. Have a judicial warrant before you kick somebody's door down, protecting and utilizing the Fourth Amendment, having body cameras, other things that I think the American people would support. They're not willing to negotiate on. I believe that we should even take away the $175 billion from the One Big Beautiful Bill. Not all my colleagues are with me on that, but you can't even agree that we shouldn't deport U.S. citizens. So I think the ball is in their court if they really want to get to a deal. But because I think the Democrats are proposing logical and basic ideas.
We'll see if there's the counter proposal from the White House and what you guys can end up agreeing upon. But just a short time ago, the president threatened to send ICE agents to airports, telling them to get ready to be moved in for security purposes starting Monday. Have you heard about this? What's your reaction to that?
I think it's, once again, Donald Trump being irresponsible and not caring about the American public. Here's the thing. There's not that many, if any, undocumented immigrants flying on U.S. Airlines. There's no MS-13 gang members. So once again, they're trying to intimidate the American people. And these folks, ICE and CBP, shouldn't be put in that position because they're not trained to do that kind of work. So you're going to have them go and racially profile Americans as they're going through security. I think is extremely dangerous. If anything happens, it's going to be on Donald Trump's hand. It's going to be on the administration's hand because they know what happened in Minnesota can happen anywhere as long as these untrained or people that shouldn't be in these situations are in these situations. Things can go out of control.
I want to pivot now to national security. Testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee on Wednesday, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe refused to say whether the intelligence community agreed that Iran was capable of launching a nuclear missile at the U.S., contradicting one of President Trump's justifications for going to war. The International Atomic Energy Agency said that Iran maintains an enriched uranium stockpile of about 60% purity. You sit on the Intel Committee. What more do you know about Iran's nuclear capabilities and the status right now?
I think you just need to look at the public statements of Donald Trump. He says, and why I think he's lying and his directors are covering for him. He said that they were 2 weeks away from getting nuclear weapons. I have not seen that in the intelligence. And Director Gabbard, as well as Director Ratcliffe, refused to confirm that Iran was 2 weeks away from getting nuclear weapons. Additionally, when we say that it was an imminent threat to the United States, that they had the capacity to have missiles that would reach the homeland, she refused again to agree with Donald Trump. And then when you look at the fact that she refused to stand by her own statement from last spring, where she said Iran was not building or was not currently trying to build a nuclear weapon, and the supreme leader had not given the go-ahead to restart the program, a program that hadn't been activated since 2003. So just look at what she said. She could have said, yes, it was an imminent threat. She refused to do that. Yes, they were 2 weeks away, but she refused to do that. Why? Because she knows it's a lie.
I do want to talk to you about the concept of imminent threat. That's really a legal term. We saw overnight IRBMs fired at U.S. interests all the way in the Indian Ocean. You had this contentious exchange with Gabbard when you pressed her about her testimony last year that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon, as you mentioned, and her refusal to stand by that statement today. Let's listen to some of that, and then let's chat on the other side.
When President Trump was asked about your testimony, he said you were wrong. Were you lying or not?
I stand by the intelligence community's complete assessment.
Yesterday, you said that only the president, only person who can determine what is an imminent threat is the president of the United States. Do you stand by that statement?
Yes, I do.
If the president can determine and ignore what you're doing, why do you guys even have a job?
So Iran has been in a de facto war with the United States for 47 years. It's killed thousands of Americans, threatened our allies in the region, poses, we know as of yesterday, as I mentioned, that it poses a threat with its intermediate range ballistic missiles. They've been now operationalized in this conflict, capable of reaching U.S. assets at this point. In your mind, what is the line between taking preemptive action against a national security threat versus waiting for something to become a so-called imminent threat?
Well, I think one of the things we need to recognize is that the president of the United States, he gets intelligence from all these sources. And he helps determine with his leadership if it's an imminent threat based on intelligence. Then if they don't, and then if he determines that it is based on his own decision, then the American people have a right to see that intelligence, to understand what's going on. And the way I kind of see it is our assets in the region have been under attack for years. Yes, Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism. They butchered and killed their own people. But that is not why he said they went to war. He said that they went to war because it was an imminent threat to the United States, the homeland, and that they were 2 weeks away from achieving a nuclear weapon. Well, they're not proving that that was the case. At the same time, when you want to look at what's imminent, is are they moving assets into place so they can launch an attack? Are they have an intention to use those assets? It's not just one thing or another, because if you take that into account, North Korea should be considered an imminent threat because North Korea currently has intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the homeland. That Tulsi Gabbard herself said so in her opening statement. So why is Iran an imminent threat, but not North Korea? So we want to see what the facts are and how they came to that conclusion. But this administration, specifically the people who lead these agencies, refuse to admit if one fact is right or another.